Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. And a special welcome as you're joining the Kenya Wantamunota Movement, KWM podcast.
Great to be diving in today.
Today, we are really getting into the weeds, doing an intensive analytical look at a document that's, well, it's stirring things up. It's fundamentally reshaping conversations about governance, about corruption in Kenya.
It really is. And our job today isn't just, skimming the surface. We're aiming for a deep extraction of the arguments in the KWM's key text, Kenya After Kenyatta, the Empire of Looters.
Exactly.
This is, I think, crucial for you, the listener, if you want to understand not just what the problems look like on the surface, but how the KWM argues this whole system was actually deliberately put together.
Right. So the mission today, extract those central claims, and some are pretty startling, we should say, and then really dissect the path forward that the KWM is proposing. We want you to walk away with a full, thorough grasp of their core beliefs.
And it starts heavy. The document's initial premise, it really sets the tone. The KWM basically argues that the dream of Kenyan independence, that big hope from '63, it very quickly turned into a marketplace for the powerful. That's their phrase.
A marketplace for the powerful.
Yeah. And they pinpoint the timing quite specifically shortly after Jomo Kenyatta's death in 1978. They're saying this wasn't just a random downturn. It marked the start of a 40-year cycle of what they call deliberate economic sabotage.
Okay, that's a massive claim. Not just mismanagement, but deliberate design. Let's start unpacking the evidence the document lays out for this idea of historical continuity. All right, so the core argument, the document's central thesis, is this. Starting right after Jomo Kenyatta's death. The next four presidents, Mwai, Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, and now Ruto, they didn't just sort of let corruption happen.
No, the KWM's assessment is much sharper. They argue these leaders systematically perfected the art of theft and wrapped it in slogans. That's a direct quote.
Wow, perfected the art of theft.
Yeah. The claim is they talked about unity, peace, progress, all the right words. But according to the KWM, their hands never left the public till. Another striking phrase from the text.
And what's really critical to their analysis you mentioned is this idea of continuity.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. They don't see these as separate episodes of corruption under different leaders. They viewed the looting as a continuous baton pass, getting maybe more sophisticated over time.
Like a relay race of theft.
Kind of, yeah. It established this deep-rooted system where getting into political office wasn't about service anymore. It became inherently transactional, a business, a very, very lucrative one. Understanding that continuity, that chain, is fundamental to their whole critique.
Okay, so the deep dive begins with Daniel-era Moi. His tenure was the longest, right?
Yeah.
And the document suggests this period really set the template for what followed.
That's the argument. Moi came in promising continuity, Nyayo following in the footsteps. But the KWM document asserts that what he actually delivered was this complex system of control.
What were the mechanisms?
Primarily through fear and very calculated bribery. The source claims he basically turned state coffers into private banks, functionally private banks, making sure that almost every public project primarily benefited his inner circle, the state elite.
And the document gives specific examples of how this decay manifested in everyday life.
Oh, yes, very sharp specifics. Take education. Supposedly the bedrock of the new nation, right? The KWM argues it was gutted by mismanagement during Moi's era. And this wasn't just like budget cuts. It was a physical collapse. Textbooks becoming luxuries, actual classrooms crumbling from neglect, teachers going unpaid for months sometimes, a real hollowing out.
And healthcare suffered a similar fate.
Exactly the same pattern, creating a nationwide crisis. The document talks about public hospitals that lost medicine. Basic supplies just vanished. Nurses fleeing the country because they couldn't work like that or weren't getting paid.
Leading to tragic outcomes.
Absolutely. The devastating reality of the KWM recounts was patients dying while waiting for basic care. Simple things. Meanwhile, the national economy was spiraling under this massive rate of debt and outright theft.
So, connecting the theft to the politics, the KWM argues Moi perfected what they call the politics of poverty.
Precisely. A two-pronged strategy, according to the document. Economically, keep people too hungry to question. Politically, keep them too scared to organize.
How do they enforce the too scared part?
The document points to things like detention without trial, torture, pervasive censorship. These weren't exceptions, they argue, but common tools used to enforce compliance, to silence anyone who dared question what was happening during this period of huge economic plundering.
And the symbol of this high-level theft, the really notorious one, is the Goldenberg scandal. We need to understand the KWM's take on this. It involved billions, right? How did it work?
Goldenberg is the KWM's ultimate case study in impunity. The mechanism was, honestly, quite clever in a terrible way. The government paid out massive compensation, huge sums for supposed gold and diamond exports.
Supposed exports.
Yeah, exports that were either wildly inflated in value or, in many cases, just didn't exist at all. Pure fiction. These payments were pushed through the central bank, draining national reserves, all under the guise of boosting exports. The amount stolen was just astronomical.
But the real kicker, the point the KWM really hammers home, is what happened after it was exposed.
Exactly. That's the core of it. The source highlights that despite the sheer scale of the theft, the public outcry, everything, virtually no real punishment followed.
Yeah.
Nothing significant.
So impunity.
Total impunity. And the KWM argues this failure, this lack of accountability, was a critical moment in Kenyan history. It basically cemented the idea that if you had political power, you were immune. It gave a green light, effectively, for every future administration to continue the same game. Moi's long rule, the document concludes, was transformative in the worst way. It taught the next generation that politics wasn't service, it was business, shielded by fear.
Okay, so fast forward to 2002. The transition to Mwai Kibaki, I remember that time. There was this huge wave of hope.
Right. Oh, explosive hope. The streets were alive. That slogan, Yodi Yawezekana Bila Moi. Everything is possible without Moi. It was everywhere. Genuine, widespread belief that things were finally changing. Reform, free primary education, ethical government. It felt real.
And that hope, that contrast, is key to how the KWM assesses this era.
Absolutely, because the document delivers a pretty quick, sobering verdict on that hope. They say something like, public hope can rot quickly in the hands of politicians.
Ouch.
Yeah. The promise of liberation started to decay almost immediately, they argue. And the prime example they point to is the swift emergence of the infamous Anglo-leasing scandal.
Anglo-leasing,
Right.
But the KWM cites this as proof that the corruption baton wasn't dropped, just passed on. How did they describe the type of theft changing here?
This is a really critical distinction that KWM makes. Corruption didn't vanish post-Moi. It just upgraded, got slicker. Anglo-leasing involved these incredibly complex ghost contracts, phantom companies registered offshore, billions paid out.
For what? What were these contracts supposedly for?
Things like security equipment that never arrived, forensic labs that were never built, services never rendered, just air. The KWM argues this proved corruption wasn't crude anymore. It dressed in suits and spoke of economic growth. It was theft disguised in the language of modernization, of fiscal responsibility.
So the economic growth that Kibaki's administration often gets credit for, the KWM sees that as built on a shaky, fraudulent foundation, widening the gap.
Precisely their argument. Yes, the economy grew on paper. GDP looked better. But who benefited? The new elite, the white-collar looters, they claim. Millions were still left behind, jobless, marginalized. And the document argues this growing inequality, kind of papered over by new roads, created the social tinderbox that exploded in the 2007 post-election crisis.
2007, a dark chapter. The KWM sees that violence, over 1,000 deaths, as the ultimate failure of that whole reform promise.
Definitely the ultimate failure. The document says the violence shattered any illusion of reform and the power-sharing deal that followed. The KWM views it very harshly, a negotiation that put political stability way ahead of justice for the victims.
They use strong imagery to describe it.
Very strong, a deeply critical image.
Yeah.
The wealthy elite negotiating peace over champagne, while the poor were left burying their dead. That's their framing. This, they claim, showed the system protected the powerful no matter what the election results were, no matter the human cost. So the Kibaki era, yes, it delivered some infrastructure, free primary education access, but fundamentally, the KWM argues, it failed to deliver ethical governance. The ethical contract remained broken.
Right. That's a powerful conclusion. The ethical contract wasn't repaired. And the KWM document suggests Uhuru Kenyatta's time in office took this erosion and basically institutionalized it, turned mega projects into mega scandals. How do they chart that path to what they call the billionaire's republic?
Well, the argument is that Kenyatta's rule normalized theft by tying it directly to these huge national infrastructure projects, and crucially, to the ballooning national debt. His administration came in with immense inherited wealth, promised a digital transformation.
The digital president.
Exactly. Yet the KWM asserts they delivered a government where corruption wasn't even hidden anymore. It was just the cost of doing business, an accepted part of the process.
And the scale of borrowing really took off then. The debt became astronomical.
Absolutely astronomical. The KWM details this list of alleged financial misuse, all linked to massive infrastructure. You've got the standard gauge railway, SGR, the infamous Eurobond saga, various dam projects that stalled or failed, even, they claim, misuse of emergency COVID-19 funds.
And the consequence.
The direct consequence, and the KWM's main economic critique here, is that public debt just swelled to historic highs. It surpassed all previous administrations combined. And they argue this wasn't accidental, it was intentionally bloated.
Intentionally bloated.
Yeah.
How does the KWM argue the costs, say for the SGR, were inflated? Can we dig into that?
Yeah, they analyze the cost per kilometer, comparing the SGR to similar rail projects elsewhere in the world. Their conclusion: the Kenyan price tag was exponentially higher, massively inflated, the implication being systemic padding, kickbacks.
And the borrowing itself, like the Eurobond.
They describe the financing structures, especially for the Eurobond, as deliberately opaque, complex, designed, they argue, to allow funds to be siphoned off through inflated procurement contracts before the money could even reach genuine public services. That's the essence of turning mega projects into mega scandals, according to the KWM.
What really stands out in their critique is the commentary on the Big Four agenda. That was Kenyatta's signature policy platform, right? Housing, health, manufacturing, food security.
Huge promises. But the KWM's verdict is brutal. They state this ambitious plan was ultimately reduced to empty brochures and photo sessions, just a massive gap between the rhetoric, the glossy presentations, and the reality on the ground for ordinary Kenyans. A branding exercise, masking failure, essentially.
And they connect this political show directly to people suffering.
Directly, noting the painful contrast. While the elite flew business class for meetings, doctors were on strike over pay, nurses protested unpaid salaries, citizens died because basic hospital equipment was missing or broken.
So the taxes people paid.
The KWM asserts those taxes, paid by hardworking young people, were effectively building private mansions for officials. In their view, every political handshake meant another backroom deal, and all the talk about national unity, just cover for ongoing deals. The Kenyatta years, they conclude, cemented corruption not just as a problem, but as the institutional norm.
Okay, finally, the current administration, William Ruto. He ran this incredibly powerful campaign, didn't he? Populist, defender of the poor, the hustler who knew hunger, knew hardship, railing against the elite.
A very potent narrative, built on righteous resentment. But the KWM document, it explicitly calls this entire narrative a lie. And we have to be crystal clear here. This is a KWM's assessment we're reporting. Their political claim about his narrative.
Understood. So what's their argument for calling it a lie?
Their highly critical assessment is that once President Ruto was in office, he simply perfected the same corruption he had condemned. They argue his administration adopted the exact same mechanisms of debt and theft established by his predecessors. No real break, just refinement.
Do they offer specific policy critiques to back that up?
Yes. The deep dive points to rising taxes, VAT, new levies hitting ordinary people hard, soaring food and fuel prices. Yet, they claim public funds kept vanishing into the same old procurement black holes.
So the KWM claims the whole bottom-up economy slogan actually became top-down exploitation in practice. What's the evidence they cite for that contradiction?
They point to this paradox. Tax collection goes up significantly, yet budgets for essential services like health and education are simultaneously documented as shrinking.
So more money coming in, less going out to the public.
That's the core of their argument. Despite these near, often painful taxes supposedly needed to feed government gluttony, their term public infrastructure, they claim, has worsened. Hospitals still lack supplies, education funding is cut, the job market remains dire. The movement suggests the tax revenue isn't primarily servicing debt or improving services. It's perpetuating the internal cycle of theft.
Why do they use that specific title, the High Priest of Corruption? It's very pointed.
The document argues his administration is particularly cynical. Why? Because it uses the emotional language of the marginalized, the hustlers, as a shield, a cover, for ongoing elite enrichment. They also point to his government being filled with what the KWM calls recycled politicians from every corrupt regime before him.
So continuity again.
Exactly. The KWM's overarching message, looking at all four post-Kenyatta presidents, is stark. Different faces, maybe different slogans, but the same fundamental, insatiable appetite for looting. It proves, in their view, the continuous nature of this political disease. Right, so we've traced this chain of leadership as presented by the KWM. Now we really need to shift focus to the consequences, the profound systemic cost. The document presents health, education, and the economy as these three essential pillars, the foundations of any functioning nation.
And the argument is they've been actively damaged.
Vandalized by greed is the phrase they use, to the detriment of every single citizen. And this is where the analysis gets really tangible, where you see the real-world effects, the pain points hitting everyone.
Yeah, the KWM seems to argue that when corruption becomes the way of governance, the whole social contract just dissolves. Okay, healthcare. The source uses this really striking metaphor. Public hospitals tell the story of national decay. What does that look like on the ground, according to them?
It looks like a critical breakdown in logistics. Empty shelves where medicine should be. Broken machines, critical diagnostic equipment just sitting there, unserviced. Staff who are demoralized, often unpaid, struggling to work under impossible conditions.
And this decay translates into actual harm for patients.
Deeply distressing, life-threatening harm. The KWM reports that patients frequently have to carry their own medicine and even surgical supplies into the hospital. Think about that.
Unbelievable.
Even more tragically, they detail specific accounts, mothers dying in childbirth because the local ambulance had no fuel. Critical equipment needed for emergencies just broken. This failure of the most basic provision, the KWM argues, highlights a kind of moral collapse.
And this failure is then contrasted sharply with how the elite operate.
Very sharply. The document talks about vanishing funds meant for universal healthcare schemes. Big promises, little delivery. And juxtaposes that with the fact that those in power, when they get sick, they fly abroad for treatment, often using taxpayer money, leaving the citizens who paid those taxes to suffer or even die in failing facilities back home.
That's a stark disconnect.
The KWM argues this disconnect is the ultimate proof of a system that's lost its humanity. They specifically mention the collapse of supply chains for essential drugs, for diagnostic kits. Budgets get allocated on paper, they say, but the money gets siphoned off through inflated procurement deals before anything reaches the patient. A nation that can't care for its sick, they conclude, has basically forfeited its moral authority.
Moving to education, another pillar. Despite every leader talking about investing in the future, the KWM argues the reality is persistent decay, both physical and financial.
Yeah, the source claims classrooms are still literally crumbling in places, and parents are trapped in this cruel cycle, sometimes forced to sell land to pay fees, just to cover the basics that should be funded by the state, compensating for stolen school funds.
And this neglect has broader consequences, like a talent drain.
A direct link, according to the KWM. They describe it with real concern. The document details this critique that Kenya essentially trains talent for export. The brightest kids, they struggle through inadequate public schools, maybe get a degree, but then what? Non-existent job prospects locally, innovation stifled, vocational and technical training massively neglected. So they leave. They have to leave.
And there's a deep inequality built into this. The KWM highlights a two-tier system.
Oh, the irony is glaring, and they point it out. The same elite, they argue, who oversee and benefit from the corruption gutting the public system, are simultaneously sending their own children overseas, or to very expensive private academies within Kenya.
Creating a closed loop for power.
Exactly. It creates a system that guarantees their kids continue to have access to opportunities, to power, while deliberately allowing the system for everyone else to collapse. Education, supposedly the great equalizer, is treated by the ruling class, according to the KWM, as a disposable inconvenience for the masses.
Okay, so health and education are victims of theft. The economy, then, in the KWM's view, is the result. The prison built by this debt.
That's the framing. The movement asserts the national debt today surpasses anything seen before, a truly devastating figure. Billions borrowed, and crucially, billions stolen through those inflated contracts and ghost projects we talked about.
And the consequence of that huge debt load falls on ordinary people.
Falls squarely on them. The KWM calls it a form of economic enslavement. Small businesses get crushed under the weight of constantly rising taxes, endless licenses, regulatory fees. Young people who were promised this dynamic hustler economy are surviving precariously, often dependent on mobile loans with insane interest rates just to get by. Farmers are losing their land because subsidies vanish or loans become predatory.
Now, the official line is often, oh, it's global markets, it's external shocks.
Right, the usual excuses. But the document is absolutely unequivocal on this.
What do you say?
The KWM insists the real cause is theft, period. They frame these economic struggles not as bad luck or global trends, but as deliberate sabotage by those who profit from crisis.
Deliberate sabotage. Can they give examples?
Yes, the source cites specific examples of what they see as manufactured crises. Things like scandals involving subsidized maize meant for the poor, which then disappears and reappears at inflated prices. Artificial fuel shortages that drive up costs. Massively inflated government tenders for roads that never get built. Even manipulation of foreign exchange rates. All designed, they argue, to enrich a select few in power at the direct expense of national stability and your wallet.
Okay, we've seen the devastating impact across health, education, the economy. Now we need to focus on the system itself. The KWM argues these aren't just failures, but features of a system designed to suppress accountability and keep this control in place. Not bad luck, but design.
Exactly. And this is where their analysis gets into the psychology, the sociology of it. They argue the whole system was constructed to keep citizens weak and dependent.
Weak and dependent? How does that work?
The logic they describe is chillingly effective. The more people struggle daily just to find food, pay school fees, get basic health care, the easier they are to control politically. They become reliant on small handouts, temporary fixes. It forces them, the KWM says, to clap for empty speeches just to get by. This desperation breeds compliance. It stops people from organizing effective opposition. Hashtag 3.1, the design of control.
And the justice system plays a key role in enabling this. The KWM calls it a playground for the rich.
That's their assessment, not a protector of rights, but a tool for the powerful. They point to specific outcomes. Court files routinely going missing, key witnesses in corruption cases being intimidated, or worse, cases involving politically connected people dragging on for years intentionally until the public forgets or gives up hope.
So accountability is just for show.
Completely staged for public consumption, according to the document. Those anti-graft commissions, they make headlines, lots of noise, but the KWM argues they function mainly to look like something is being done without ever achieving real convictions of the big fish.
They have a phrase that sums up the outcome.
Two powerful, painful observations that encapsulate it. Whistleblowers die poor, thieves retire rich. It suggests the very institutions meant to deliver justice are actually part of the problem, used as political tools. Hashtag 3.2 rigged systems.
And this rigging, it extends beyond the courts, to the media, to watchdog groups.
Yes, it impacts those traditional checks and balances too. The KWM notes that the media, which maybe once had a bolder, more independent streak, is now heavily dependent on government advertising revenue.
Money talks.
Money talks. And that reliance, the KWM claims, creates this powerful incentive for self-censorship, a chilling effect, leading to a collective silence on really critical stories about high-level corruption. Similarly, public watchdog organizations are described as often barking but never biting, maybe making some noise, but ultimately being co-opted, starved of funds, or just ignored.
So the whole system ensures stability for the looters, no matter who wins an election.
That's the argument. And it leads to their assessment of democracy itself. The KWM argues powerfully that elections have stopped being genuine contests about leadership, about ideas, about vision. Instead, they've become competitions in bribery, where huge amounts of money and manipulation often decide the outcome way before you even cast your vote. Democracy, in this very critical view, has become theater for looters in suits.
And this illusion is maintained even after the election through what they call the handshake culture. Explain that.
Ah, the handshake culture. This is the mechanism, they argue, that effectively neuters any real political opposition. After an election, even a contested one, the losing side, or powerful figures from it, simply join the winners through these strategic alliances, these handshakes.
So everyone ends up on the same side.
Pretty much. It ensures the gravy train keeps rolling, the cycle of corruption continues, regardless of who people voted for. The official opposition becomes, in their words, mere decoration. Parliament ends up just rubber stamping executive decisions, more borrowing, more looting. This structure, the KWM concludes, guarantees that genuine change will never just bubble up from the top. It can't. Hashtag call to action 1, middle segment.
Wow. Okay, we've just absorbed a really, really devastating analysis from the Kenya Wantamnotam movement. We've heard their account of 4 decades of failure, neglect, systemic corruption, all structured, they argue, to keep citizens weak. But, and this is crucial, the value of this document, this movement, is that it doesn't just stop at despair. It asks, okay, so what do we do now?
Exactly. They provide a path forward, a clear, unified path focused on empowering you, the citizen.
So if this deep dive is resonating with you, if the critique of empty hospitals, crumbling schools, that crushing debt, if that strikes a nerve,
then the next step, according to the KWM, is to move beyond just understanding it intellectually. It's about participating in the organized civic renewal they're calling for.
right? This is your chance to shift from analysis to action, to join a collective effort aimed at reclaiming the country's future. The first step is simple. Visit www.wantamnotam.com and create your account.
And the KWM really emphasizes that real, lasting change has to be localized. It's built from the ground up in your community. So on the website, all 47 counties are listed. Find yours.
Find your county, and then what?
And then start posting. Share your ideas. What needs fixing in your village, your town, your city? What solutions do you see? This decentralized sharing, this collective intelligence, is absolutely core to their strategy for awakening.
And while you're on the site, make sure you arm yourself with the knowledge needed to drive this change. Visit our website to download your 2 essential ebooks. They're free.
That's right. The first is 1, we must never forget these Kenyan heroes. And the second is the document we've been discussing today, 2, Kenya after Kenyatta, the Empire of Looters. These give you the historical background, the detailed analysis you need for this peaceful awakening.
Okay, let's get back to the document's conclusion. The KWM is completely uncompromising on this point. Change will not come from the top. It cannot, because, as they put it, the same people who broke the system cannot fix it.
A powerful statement. They argue the focus has to shift entirely forcefully to the organized power of the people themselves.
So what is the KWM's actual prescription? Their clear, positive plan for national renewal.
The solution they propose is an organized, peaceful awakening. That's the key phrase. They see this as a process, reclaiming national dignity, ending what the document calls the worship of thieves. It's a call for lawful collective resistance, built carefully on knowledge, on civic engagement, and critically, on unity. Hashtag tag 4.1, reclaiming power and unity.
And they ground this in the Constitution, right? Reminding citizens that the ultimate power, sovereignty, actually belongs to the people.
Yes, but with a crucial warning. Power unused decays. The civic machinery is there in the Constitution, but it needs to be actively used consistently, not just during election season.
And unity is central to making that power effective.
Absolutely central. The document stresses that real systemic change only begins when people unite. Unite across those divisions that are often manipulated tribe and class. This unity across different groups is critical. Because, as the KWM highlights, the struggle is fundamentally shared. Doctors, teachers, farmers, students, small business owners, they argue everyone is suffering under these vandalized pillars. Their interests are actually aligned, even if they're told otherwise.
So how does this translate into action for an individual citizen? What's the responsibility?
Concrete civic responsibility. The document insists citizens must get organized at the community level, form watchdog groups, vote wisely based on principles, not just handouts, actively monitor county budgets, national budgets, hold leaders accountable through every peaceful, lawful means available. It's about active, continuous participation, challenging that old idea that your job is done once you cast a vote. Hashtag tag 4.2, the path of peaceful civic resistance. And the KWM is extremely clear. This awakening has to be peaceful, democratic, lawful. They detail specific lawful methods for civic action. Things designed to put pressure on the corrupt system without resorting to violence, because violence, they argue, only benefits those in power.
What kinds of methods?
Things like mass petitions, strategic legal challenges using the courts, focused policy pressure campaigns targeting specific issues, and widespread mass awareness initiatives making sure the public knows exactly where their money is supposed to be going and where it's actually ending up. Transparency.
And this call for renewal, it goes beyond individual citizens. It includes institutions.
Yes, they call for a crucial institutional shift across society. This includes a really powerful call for, say, churches and mosques to speak truth again, to find their prophetic voice without fear, for the media to prioritize journalistic integrity over ad revenue, and maybe most importantly, for communities themselves to stop selling votes for crumbs, to break that cycle of transactional politics right at the local level. Essentially, Essentially, the document is a blueprint. It asserts that you rebuild a nation not with empty slogans from politicians, but through consistent, informed civic action. Every part of society, workers, students, professionals, even the diaspora, needs to recognize their shared struggle and take ownership of demanding reform, demanding integrity. Hashtag 4.3, the people's verdict. Summary of the solution.
So the final summary of the solution is really a pivot away from just documenting the despair of the past.
Exactly. It's a call for Kenya to remember who actually owns the country. And the KWM is clear. It's the people, not the succession of presidents. It's the people who built the roads, farmed the land, taught the children, paid the taxes, the very taxes that were then stolen.
And the final thought on this awakening.
It's an encouragement to reject violence, to replace it with the power of knowledge, strategic unity, and relentless civic action. The KWM concludes that the answer isn't despair, it's awakening. The sleeping giant must rise, but not with violence, with knowledge, with unity, with civic action.
And they offer a final promise? Or maybe a challenge?
A provocative promise, yeah. That Kenya's future won't be written just by those currently holding office. It will be written by those citizens who refuse to stay silent, who get organized, and who lawfully demand a return to genuine governance, to service, to integrity. Hashtag outro.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the KWM document, Kenya after Kenyatta, the Empire of Looters. We've systematically unpacked their analysis, what they identify as 4 decades of systemic looting, the devastating impact on core services like health and education, and importantly, their powerful organized call for a peaceful civic renewal.
The KWM really provides this robust framework for understanding how, in their view, corruption became almost synonymous with governance itself in Kenya. But crucially, they don't leave it there. They offer a map for change rooted in the Constitution, rooted in people power.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on today.
It has to be this. Considering the KWM's claim that the ruling system over decades has been deliberately designed to foster citizen weakness and dependence, how can organized, nonviolent, decentralized movements like the one they propose effectively transform such a powerful and entrenched system? How do they avoid being neutralized or co-opted by the very forces they're trying to overthrow? That's the huge, immediate challenge of the awakening they're calling for. Hashtag call to action 2, sign-off segment.
Something to definitely think about. Before we sign off, please remember to join the movement that's driving this crucial conversation and providing the tools for change.
The KWM is calling for your active participation right at the grassroots level. So, one more time, visit www.wantamnotam.com and create your account. Remember, all 47 counties are listed there.
Find your county, start posting, share your ideas, your solutions. Help build that collective intelligence that the movement believes is key to driving real change in your village, your city, your nation.
And don't forget to equip yourself with the foundational documents we discussed today. They're essential reading. Visit our website to download your 2 free ebooks. 1, we must never forget these Kenyan heroes, and 2, Kenya after Kenyatta, the Empire of Looters.
Thank you so much for listening and for engaging so deeply with this vital material today.
Thank you for listening to the Kenya Wantamnotam Movement, KWM podcast.